In a new decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has just ruled 9-0 in a case that involved the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This unanimous decision from the court, it was in favor of a woman who lost her son when a police officer killed that son during a traffic stop to the U.S. Constitution.
Hold up. We got to get this shit right. We got to start from the beginning, bruh. We got to start from the beginning. What up, guys? We got some big news. Big news here. All right, so don't go anywhere, people. Massive news. What's up, Outlaw Cop Watch? All right, guys. You guys are going to like this shit, all right? I think you guys are going to like a Supreme Court decision that just came out. All right? Is there a little echo? Oh, wow. Sucks. All right, but we're going to have to deal with it for now. What's up, Midwest? Tri-County. All right, guys. So a Supreme Court case law just came out, and this case law should slow down, hopefully at least slow down the what we're seeing in police brutality, right? Because from my understanding, cops were getting allowed to get away with these things as long as they were in the moment, right? But let's just watch a little bit. I will pause for comments. You guys, this shit is important. You guys are going to love this. So pay attention.
In a new decision, the U.S. Supreme Court has just ruled 9-0 in a case that involved the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. This unanimous decision from the court, it was in favor of a woman who lost her son when a police officer killed that son during a traffic stop. Now, the story itself obviously comes with a lot of nuance, but the key takeaway is that the American citizen in this particular case, she prevailed against the state, and therefore, this unanimous Supreme Court decision expands all of our rights under the Fourth Amendment. But funny enough, the specifics of this case, they might not make that a universally good thing because it might make the job of a police officer that much more difficult and dangerous.
Hold on, Bubba. I got to stop you there. What is all this? We got officer safety. In reality, this is a massive blow to officer safety. All right, because cops be getting away with all kinds of killings. And basically what this Supreme Court ruling says is that it's not just going to depend on the moment in real time, right? It's gonna the entirety of the situation is gonna take into account of what actually fucking happened. So pay attention. I know that sounds a little difficult to understand, but trust me, there's a lot that goes with this.
But in order to explain what that means, I need to go through the details.
Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate that, bro.
To start with, let me give you a bit of background on what actually happened here. 9 years ago, on April 28th, 2016, at approximately 2:45 in the afternoon, an incident took place over in Harris County, Texas. A police officer named Roberto Felix Jr. received a radio alert about a vehicle that had outstanding toll violation. Officer Felix, while driving down the highway, spotted that particular car, turned on his lights, and pulled it over. Now, the driver in that car, 24-year-old Ashton Barnes, he pulled over to the side and he stopped on the shoulder of the highway. So far, so good. Everything is by the book. Officer Felix then got out of his police cruiser. He walks over to the car and he asks to see Ashton's driver's license as well as his proof of insurance. Now, Ashton, he says that he doesn't have his driver's license on him and that the car is actually a rental, which was true. It was actually his girlfriend's rental car, and it was the rental car that had these unpaid tolls on it, meaning it really didn't have anything to do with it. Also, it is perhaps worth mentioning that driving without having your driver's license on your person in the state of Texas is technically a crime, although it's a very minor one. According to the Texas State Transportation Code, specifically subsection 521.025, drivers in the state must have their driver's licenses on them while operating a motor vehicle. But if you don't have your driver's license on you, you'll just be given a ticket, which you can actually dismiss if you go on over to the courthouse and just prove that you do have a license. It'll just cost you a $10 dismissal fee. Meaning, as a practical sense, that not having your license on...
Yeah, I think Cameron understands the severity, the blow to officer safety that this case lands. You know, in reality, I think because they're not just going to be looking at the last 2 seconds of what put the officer in danger. Like, was it They're going to look, like I said, the entirety of the situation. So let's say the cop is actually violating the Fourth Amendment of somebody. No, that doesn't allow the cops to be in that moment, right? So I think that shit is important to understand, and let's just keep listening because, like I said, I think this is something that, especially this community, we should all be talking about it. And I can tell you this much: there's channels like Steve Leto and civil rights lawyer that are going to be able to explain this better than I can. They're going to be able to put this into context better than I can. I do understand the severity. I mean, the implications of this for police. They're basically crying about saying, let me just read to you guys the way I wrote it down already. Okay, give me 1 second. In a 9-0 decision made by the Supreme Court, a decision was made regarding the Fourth Amendment that would protect people from violent cops. Let me explain. The Fourth Amendment is what separates the government from the Gestapo. A landmark unanimous decision made by the Supreme Court will hopefully halt the violent actions by police from this day forward. Cops will argue that this decision will make their jobs easier. Actually, I meant to say harder. Cops will argue that this decision will make their jobs harder. People will argue that maybe cops shouldn't escalate every encounter, especially minor infractions. Did this just obey and you must comply mentality create this by emboldening cops to take it to the extreme every time, especially for like minor incidents like this guy was just talking about. We continuously advocate for cops to truly know and understand the amendments before even applying for the job. Like, why would you hire a mechanic who doesn't understand mechanics? Why would you hire a lifeguard who doesn't swim? A chef who can't cook or a maid who can't clean? Right? I know the last one, some of you guys are like, well, that depends on what she looks like. Come on, guys. Let's pay attention to what's going on here. All right?
On you is a very minor issue in the state of Texas. Okay, so that's the situation that Ashton found himself in. He's in a traffic stop. He's driving a car that has unpaid tolls on it because it's a rental car. He doesn't have his license on him, and he's now rummaging through some papers in the car trying to find the insurance paperwork. This is, though, when things take a bad turn. Here is how this chain of events was described in the court filings. Quote, during this interaction, Ashton was digging around in the car. Officer Felix warned Ashton to stop doing so, and claiming that he smelled marijuana, asked Ashton if he had anything in the vehicle Officer Felix should know about. In response, Ashton turned off the vehicle, placing his keys near the gear shift, and told Officer Felix that he might have the requested documentation in the trunk of the car. What happened next was captured on Officer Felix's dash cam. Now, we do actually have that dash cam footage, and fortunately, it's pretty clear visually. But just because of the angle, it's a little hard to make out what's going on, and so let's do this. I'm going to show you the footage, and then I'll give you a moment-by-moment breakdown of what actually happened, because otherwise you might not actually know what you're looking at.
What's up, Brandon?
And also mention that all of this took place within the span of roughly 20 seconds, but it's a very, very densely packed 20 seconds. And so let's start with the dash cam from the officer's car.
Sure, go ahead and pop the trunk for me. Okay. Go ahead and put that paper off the side for me. Go ahead and shut that for me. Don't fucking move! Don't fucking move!
Oh, no.
Okay, so let's unpack what we actually just watched there. Starting at 2:45 p.m., 28 seconds, Officer Felix orders Ashton to open the trunk of the car. At this time, you'll notice that the left blinker on that car is still on, indicating that the keys were still in the ignition and that the car itself was on. 5 seconds later, Ashton opens the trunk of the car. 3 seconds later, the left blinkers turn off, indicating that the car itself was turned off. 6 seconds later,
I'm not gonna lie, that's one hell of a breakdown. This guy's fucking took everything into account, and I'm guessing that's what happened during the court proceedings, right? Everything was taken into account, right?
Officer Felix tells Ashton to get out of the car. 1 second after that, the driver's side door opens. However, 3 seconds after that, you see that the left blinker turns back on, indicating that the car itself was turned back on and the keys in the ignition. 1 second after that, Officer Felix draws his weapon. And then, 1 second later, Officer Felix points his weapon at Ashton and begins shouting, "Don't effing move," as the car begins to move forward. At this point, the court document describes what happened. Quote, Officer Felix stepped onto the car's doorsill with his weapon drawn and pointed at Ashton and shoved his gun into Ashton's head, pushing his head hard to the right. Then the car started to move. While the car was moving, Officer Felix shot inside the vehicle with no visibility as to where he was aiming. The next second, Officer Felix fired another shot while the vehicle was still moving. After 2 seconds, the vehicle came to a full stop, and Officer Felix yelled, "Shots fired," into his radio. Officer Felix held Ashton at gunpoint until backup arrived, while Ashton sat bleeding in the driver's seat. At 2:57 p.m., which was just 12 minutes after the trunk was opened, Ashton was pronounced dead on the scene. Now, the relevant piece of information that we really need to take a...
And I'm guessing the reason why the Supreme Court ruling was the way it was because the officer absolutely escalated it, right? Like, there was a comment I watched on this, the first comment that I read. This guy right here says, as a police officer in law enforcement, I myself would not have stepped into that vehicle. And this guy says, retired police officer here. I would have stepped away from the vehicle as it drove off, called backup, and continued the pursuit. Stepping onto the vehicle was not a good move. Well, I mean, not for the guy who fucking died, right?
Away from the scene in order to understand the legal case moving forward is that Officer Felix chose
Raider Tommy, good
to
to
jump
see you,
into
bro.
the car as the car started to move forward. And within just 2 seconds of being on the car that's moving, he decided to shoot his gun at Ashton. Just 2 seconds of the car moving after he jumped on it himself. Meaning that you can make the argument that Officer Felix created the life-threatening situation that he found himself in. Now, I'm of course not saying that he did, only that an argument could be made that the police officer created the life-threatening situation. Now, after this shooting took place, there were 2 separate trains of legal activity, the criminal investigations as well as a civil lawsuit. On the criminal side, you had the homicide division of the Houston Police Department investigate this entire incident, and they compiled their findings into a report. This report was then presented to a grand jury who found no probable cause of an indictment, meaning Officer Felix would not be prosecuted for murder. Also, the local precinct conducted a separate internal investigation, and they found that Officer Felix did not violate their standard operating procedures. This meant that from just a criminal perspective, there was nothing that Officer Felix had to worry about. In the eyes of the law, from that perspective, he followed police protocol and he killed Ashton only while acting in self-defense while he truly and rationally believed that his life was in danger. So that's all on the criminal side. However, on the civil side, Officer Felix was not as lucky. You see, Ashton's parents, they filed a lawsuit on behalf of their son, arguing that what Officer Felix did during that traffic stop amounted to excessive force under the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. Listen, it's obvious that the financial system is not looking too great. After being pumped up with trillions of virtually free government dollars, best company to use in 5-star reviews from you can call and they can first qualifying purchase. So give a link to their of the text.
Your ad don't pay me, homie. Right? Fuck that ad. Nah, just kidding, guys. I don't even know what it is about, but I figured his people can go watch that ad over there. Yeah, thank you, Modern Retro Radio. He subscribed to my website. Make sure you guys go check out my website for sure, because I got some exclusive content going up over there.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, initially, at the lower court level, Ashton's parents lost the case. The district court, they issued a judgment in favor of Officer Felix, saying the following, quote, "At the moment in time the officer fired his weapon, he reasonably believed that his life was in danger. Therefore, the officer did not violate the Fourth Amendment." Ashton's parents, they then appealed that decision to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. However, the appeals court also ruled against them. In their decision, you had the Fifth Circuit lay out the legal standard upon which they evaluate these types of officer-involved shootings. And they explain how, according to their legal test, it does not matter what happened prior to the shooting. As long as at the moment of the shooting, the officer believed that his life was in danger, well, it did not matter how he got into that situation. All that mattered was that the officer was in a life or death situation. Here's specifically what they wrote. This was again from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Quote, "We may only ask whether Officer Felix was in danger at the moment of the threat that caused him to use deadly force against Ashton. In the circuit, it is well established that the excessive force inquiry is confined to whether the officers or other persons were in danger at the moment of the threat that resulted in the officer's use of deadly force. This moment of threat test means that the focus of the inquiry should be on the act that led the officer to discharge his weapon. Any of the officer's actions leading up to the shooting are not relevant for the purposes of an excessive force inquiry in this circuit." In the totality of their decision, they were citing an earlier precedent that created that legal standard, meaning that according to the legal standard that the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was using, the so-called moment of threat test, it did not really matter that the police officer put himself in that situation by jumping into the car. The singular question is whether or not, at the moment of danger, did the officer have a reasonable fear that his life was an imminent threat. The appeals court found that he did, and therefore there was nothing else to discuss. However, Ashton's parents, they appealed this decision as well, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the central legal question that Ashton's parents brought up to the U.S. Supreme Court was simply a question of timing. Whether courts can look only at the last 2 seconds right before the shooting, or whether they can also consider the earlier events, the ones that led up to those 2 seconds. And after hearing oral arguments from both sides, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled unanimously in favor of Ashton's parents. And in doing so, they effectively eliminated the so-called moment of threat test. Writing...
Damn, so this was just decided May 15th, guys. Bam, right there. This shit just happened, y'all. Hell yeah. Good job on the parents, man. Like, right? You never want to lose your kid, right? I mean, fuck. Whatever he did, I don't really know, all right? But cops want to escalate every single little fucking thing to death. They want to escalate it to death, right? Like, fuck.
The opinion for the majority of the court, you had Alina Kagan write the following, quote, "The question here is whether that framework permits courts in evaluating a police shooting or other use of force to apply the so-called moment of threat rule used in the courts below. Under that rule, a court looks only to the circumstances existing at the precise time an officer perceived the threat inducing him to shoot. Today, we reject that approach as improperly narrowing the requisite Fourth Amendment analysis. To assess whether an officer acted reasonably in using force, a court must consider all the relevant circumstances."
So, I think it was Mid-and-State Transparency or Mid-and-State Media. I think it used to be Transparency, or am I wrong? Mid-and-State Media. He mentioned earlier in the video that this only pertains to court, right? When it goes to the courts. So, I mean, we're still going to be seeing a lot of justified, right? So we're still going to be seeing a lot of justified killings from police, I'm guessing. But this only pertains to when it ends up in the court. But because of this, should it end up in court even more now because the totality of the circumstances? So can the police departments continue to dismiss facts, right? Can police departments, hey, Mid-and-State, this would be a good question for you and everybody else. But can the police department ignore facts leading up to the circumstances, right? Because even though it only pertains to when it goes to court, I think it has to be relevant, because when Supreme Court cases come out, police need to abide by it, right? Obviously, they don't fucking like to abide by it, and they try to, minimize the the importance of the Constitution. Man, last night I was recording a cop, and I told him, the First Amendment. He said, I'm not going to play that game. And I was like, the First Amendment's a game. Oh, shit, everybody. Did you hear that? The First Amendment's a game. It's a game to these guys, the Constitution, right? But I think in reality, it does pertain to incidents that's happening, and justified killings. I think it'll hopefully start to change things for the better, but it's all wishful thinking, man, and my crazy experience and all the shit that I fucking have seen while doing the kind of work that I do. Yeah, guys, a lot of bullshit. And they're even trying to, how would I say it? Like circumvent justice even more now, right? So let's keep watching. Video's almost over.
Including facts and events leading up to the climactic moment. Now, the entire federal legal system works exactly on these types of rules, tests, standards, and precedents set forth by the U.S. Supreme Court. Meaning that moving forward, any other officer-involved shooting in the whole country will no longer be judged by this moment of threat test. That test is literally no more. Moving forward, the courts will have to, quote, consider all the relevant circumstances, including facts and events leading up to the climactic moment. This is a brand new Fourth Amendment legal standard, which on the one hand is a good thing for U.S. citizens. It gives all of us more protections under the Fourth Amendment. We are now all better protected from police escalation. However, for police officers, this creates more hurdles because now it won't only matter if at the very moment of the shooting, they believe their life was in danger. Instead, the courts will now look at the totality of the events that led up to that particular moment. And while you hope this will just lead to more justice, you can easily imagine a scenario where a police officer does everything by the book. He still finds himself in a dangerous situation with someone trying to kill him. The officer shoots, injures, and or kills that other person. But now that officer might be on the hook if you have a DA who's making the argument that the officer himself somehow created that dangerous situation. However, I would love to know your thoughts on this particular decision that just came out of the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you think on net this is a positive? Do you think that the fact that this creates more protections for us under the Fourth Amendment is a good thing? Or do you think that it's outweighed by the negatives that are going to be incurred by police officers across the country? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please leave them down in the comments section.
Homie, these are my thoughts. You asked for them. Let me give them to you. The cops already have way too many umbrellas of protection. Qualified immunity, internal investigations, police unions. We pay for the lawsuits and yada, yada, yada. We pay for their attorneys so much. And not only that, cops get fired, they can appeal. They lose the appeal, they can appeal again. And even if they get fired, they fucking file a lawsuit. If you really look at the patterns, folks, almost every police department in the entire nation has been sued numerous times by cops who've been fired. That's why they don't like to fire cops. That's why they allow them to resign, because they'll put that in the stipulation. You can't sue us, motherfucker. So they allow cops to resign. I think if they're going to allow cops to resign, and they should have been fired, don't allow them to keep their fucking pensions. Take that shit away, right? Because when cops are allowed to resign, they're allowed to keep their pensions. So, man, what do you guys think about this? Let's go ahead and read a couple of these comments, right? Let's see. As a retired peace officer, this is a good thing. Traffic laws have been manipulated to the point they have become simply revenue generators, not based on victim crimes. M.E. Harris, thank you. Our tolls should be illegal. The roads have been paid for and are now a business. A foreign company runs the business. Fucking A right. Fucking A right. Right? Let me see. This is the failure of the Fed and state local governments for not investing in infrastructure. If they don't do it, someone is going to pick up the slack. We need more Fourth Amendment rulings like this, but stopping them from even getting to this point, first place, just leave us alone. See what this guy says. As a former law enforcement officer, I wholeheartedly agree with this SCOTUS decision. Maybe some of these officers with fragile egos will think twice before deliberately escalating a situation and giving unlawful orders to people. William Stansbury feels liberated from the chains that he had when he was a cop, and he could never, ever speak ill of the department because it's against policy. And that's why cops, whenever you talk about another cop, they'll be like, "Oh, I can't speak on that," yeah, because they're not allowed to tarnish the reputations of the department as a whole, right? They're supposed to make it look like isolated incidents and shit. So, yeah. All right. Let me see. What's up, Spot Check News? Not paid endorsement. Highly recommend the Cobra 4000 triple camera dash cam and radar detector systems. Orale. Hell yeah. The cop has to be accountable for escalating the situation to where someone reacted in a way that should not have happened in the first place. They hate our freedom of movement. Absolutely hate our freedom of movement, right? Fuck yeah. Arctic Blue. Like the off-duty cops who chased the man down for 9 miles and killed him for supposedly showing a gun. Word? Mid and state media. Forcing licenses and insurance is unconstitutional. No license should be needed for travel, and states cannot force people to contract with the private businesses like insurance companies. Orale. Money is the only thing that cops understand. This is true. Job security, right? Job security. Let's see what else we got. The last several encounters with police I have not been favorable. They were less than civil with their attitudes and highly manipulative in their use of seemingly polite language to attempt to get me to do or admit things which had nothing to do with the circumstances. Their training and protocols add to this mess. Allowing for such language and attitudes, it's quite shameful. I agree. So what I'm seeing from this video, there are a lot of comments of folks who have actually worked in law enforcement, and they fucking agree with this. Just pay attention to how massive that is right there, how important that right there is, right? Because we have cops who are no longer cops, who are retired or whatever, and they're saying that they agree with this decision, which I do as well. I agree with it as well. As a retired law enforcement officer, I think it's a step in the right direction. I can definitely make slim situations more hazardous. It can definitely make slim situations more hazardous, but officers should be able to adjust. Traffic stops, unfortunately, are often abused by some law enforcement officers. Fucking A right. Fucking A right. Self-defense laws for civilians generally do not apply if the person who used deadly self-defense created the situation in which they used force. As a retired Leo, I ask why the same standard shouldn't apply to law enforcement. The authority should come with a higher level of responsibility. Telling you guys, man, this is great. Honestly, I'm having a hard time believing it. We the people really needed this win. This just made my day. That's right, Robert Glass, mine too. I find nothing negative in this decision. Everything a law enforcement officer does or says should be held to the highest scrutiny standards. Bravo. Fucking A right. Bravo, guys. Bravo. What else we got? As someone who lives in Harris County, Texas, I advise you to look at all the shootings the police have participated in over the last 10-15 years. There is no doubt, if the record is viewed, that there is propensity for officers to do stupid things and shoot their way out. I'm a former law enforcement officer. My uncle was retired HPD. One of my childhood friends is a disabled former HPD. The propensity to reach for the firearm is way too high in Harris County. Yep. Man, oh man. Right. I like this comment. Good decision. The law is to protect the citizen, not to justify law enforcement's actions. Right. This should end no knock warrants or raids. I don't believe that it's gonna happen. Any Supreme Court ruling that helps to protect our constitutional rights is a good thing. I agree. Definitely agree with that. So the no-knock warrants will be are finally going to be scrutinized, and policing officials might need to realize that a no-knock warrant might not be the only way to arrest the suspect. I say that's a good thing. Anyone recall Brian Malinowski, Little Rock Airport exec, who was killed just over a year ago at night in his home by agents breaking down the door and rushing in? Mr. Malinowski thought it was intruders and had his self-defense handgun at the ready. He fired, then was filled with lead from the jackbooted Gestapo's mentality of dead or alive. Any reasonable person could conclude that Mr. Malinowski, having a full-time job at the airport, could have been seized at any moment after leaving his house the next morning. Then, having taken him into custody, other officers could serve the home warrant immediately. Powerful fucking comment on that, right? But that's not cops' mentality. Cops' mentality is let's go fucking raise hell, right? We're gonna get him any way possible. This guy, Samson Mool, says, I was homeless, did drugs, went into prison where I got to know God. He changed my life. Now I have a home, a wife, and a lovely daughter, Zoe, and a stream of income that gets me. Jeez, come on, bro. What the fuck does that have to do with the video, you asshole? When police officers have a body camera with microphone, all the interactions between... I was going to say something good about the guy's family, but shit, bro. I mean, are you kidding me right now? You want us to ask you how you fucking making your money or what, you asshole? When police officers have a body camera with microphone, all of the interactions between the officer and the public should be able to watch and listen to it in courts. Absolutely. Police officers are not following the laws. Sometimes you can watch this happening on YouTube every single day. Goddamn right. I guess cops will stop sticking their foot in your door, preventing you from closing it. Look at all the wishful thinkers. I mean, we're all hoping for. I'm not gonna lie. I am one myself. I'm not talking shit. I'm a wishful thinker myself. But this should lead to fewer incidents. It also should mean that no knock warrants that lead to the unaliving of someone should break any qualified immunities, so that all involved are held to account by a jury of their peers. That does bring into question also, right, of the other officers standing around doing fucking absolutely nothing while this cop is beating your ass and shit, right? Lavoy Fincom had his rights violated in a big way. They charge a lot of money to get a body cam video in my neck of the woods. One cost me $1,700. Damn. Shit. Damn. Yep. Well, what do you guys think? You think this is a good thing? You think we're going to see some good come out of this? Or you think this is just going to be like another... So you thought, right? Fuck. It's never going to make it to the courts. Right? It'll never make it to the courts, guys. It already did, man. It already did. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and end this. I wanted to share this great news. I think it is great news. I am hoping to hear from Steve Leto's channel, because that dude breaks down stuff like this very, very well. You know, I think I did a pretty good job of explaining some of this shit, especially having seen so many of these types of videos, being out there on the field recording cops, seeing how they can act, with people, escalate everything, escalate feelings. They're always doing that shit, and we've seen it firsthand out there. So, like I said, I'm hoping to see a civil rights lawyer, particularly civil rights lawyer, breakdown on this, and Steve Leto's breakdown on this, and all the other auditors as well. And you guys, fuck yeah, hell yeah. All right, guys, peace. I'm out of here.